Hello, my name is Anders Hector and I will be moderating today's symposium. Everything we say will be translated and you can follow a stream in Korean or English on the website. There will also be a Slido box where you can put your questions, and we really encourage you to do so to the speakers, and we will read them as they come in. And I will introduce first the host to this symposia, which is the Ambassador of Sweden to the Republic of Korea, Ambassador Daniel Wolvén. Please.
Thank you, Anders, distinguished guests. It is my great pleasure to welcome everybody to this symposium on the Sciences Awards of the Nobel Prizes this year, 2021. And the title for this session summarizes the discoveries that are being awarded: discovery of receptors for temperature and touch, Earth's climate and how humanity influences it, and tools for building molecules. We will hear today from Swedish and Korean experts about their views on the awards, about the scientists and their work, what it is that they have achieved, and what this means for all of us, and especially in the context of South Korea. Our intention with organizing this event is to create an engaging meeting space for Korean and Swedish people. I hope we will be reaching those of you who value discovering curiosity, whatever your background. This symposium is organized by the Swedish Embassy in Seoul, together with partners in Sweden and here in Korea. These partners are incredibly important to research here in Korea and to cooperation in research between Sweden and Korea. And I extend my heartfelt appreciation to each and all of you, and especially to the Korea Academy of Science and Technology for contributing in making these symposia possible. I hereby declare open the Swedish-Korea Memorial Program 2021. Thank you for your attention. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Ambassador. And next, I would like to turn to one of the most important persons in research in the Republic of Korea, himself a distinguished scientist with a long career and a leading authority in the important field of thin film transistors for flat panel displays and solar cells. He is a relentlessly positive and supporting friend of the Swedish Embassy, a thoughtful and considerate and generous person to that, the 9th President to the Korean Academy of Science and Technology, Professor Emeritus Min-Koo Han, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Swedish Embassy for continuous effort in hosting the Swedish-Korean Nobel Memorial Program 2021, even with the difficulties of pandemic circumstance. It is truly meaningful time to collaborate again for this year's program, following last year as the partner of the Embassy. In early part of October, the global attention and the publicity had to Stockholm, Sweden, due to the Nobel Prize. Of course, Korea, like any other country, has long been a country with great interest in the Nobel Prize. It is also true that expectation of Korea to be awarded its first Nobel Prize for science field has become tremendous than ever since the research output has been increased considerably. In addition to those background, I think that Nobel Memorial Program, which explained the field and achievement of this year's Nobel Prize, has established itself as an essential event for everyone, not only for the people who are interested in science. I also hope the lessons from the works of Nobel laureate to give many great insight to the young scientists and to motivate their academic endeavors. We, Sweden and Korea, have invited world-renowned scientists in the field of physiology or medicine, physics and chemistry for today's program. Though this meaningful words of invited scientists today, I hope that it will be precious time for everyone who is attending Nobel Memorial Program since 2021 through the online. I deeply appreciate 3 Korean speakers to spare the time, and fortunately that 3 speakers from Korea, they work together with the Nobel laureate. So they'll provide very, very explain the insight to our young scientists. Lastly, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Swedish ambassador, His Excellency Daniel Bolben, for all of his efforts in organizing this event, and Professor Eun-mi Kim, President of Ewha University, for this wonderful providing all the environment, including this wonderful building. I would like also thanks to speakers from Sweden and Korea for sparing valuable time. I really say thanks again for our speakers. Last but not least, I look forward to continuing to cooperate with the Sweden Embassy to promote the collaboration of science and technology for both countries. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you will all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hahn, for your continued support and kind words. Universities are the most important institutions in society for mobility of researchers and student exchange. And we have 5 universities are supporting these symposia that we're doing today. And we're going to hear some brief remarks from each of them. And I want to introduce all 5 at once, and then you will see some video messages from them. First, in this order, President of Ewha Women's University, Eun-mi Kim. Then the President of the University of Gothenburg, Ms. Eva Wiberg. The President of KTH Royal Institute of Science of Technology, Sigbrit Karlsson. President of Lund University, Erik Renström, and the President of Umeå University, Hans Adolfsson. Please roll the tape.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to welcome you to the 2021 Sweden-Korea Nobel Memorial Program. My name is Eun-mi Kim, and as president of Ewha Women's University, it is a privilege to co-host this program at Ewha with the Embassy of Sweden in Seoul for the 2nd year. I would like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Daniel Bolben and the Swedish Embassy for organizing this event to honor the Nobel Prize and provide a forum to gather and exchange diverse ideas and views. I'm particularly touched that this program is taking place at Ewha, where the women's education began for the first time in Korea's history in 1886, 135 years ago. Since then, Ewha has grown into a research university with a mission to open all doors of academic discipline to women, and that includes all the fields that the Nobel Prize honors. In particular, as we are an all-women's higher educational institution, we are committed to helping foster and empower women scientists whose research would be significant worldwide in all facets of our lives for sustainable development and world peace. I would like to extend my heartfelt congratulations to the Nobel laureates in physics, chemistry, and physiology or medicine. Dr. Sukuro Manabe of Princeton University in the United States, Dr. Klaus Hasselmann of Hamburg University in Germany, Dr. Giorgio Parisi of the Sapienza University of Rome, Italy, Dr. Benjamin List of the Max Planck Institute in Germany, Dr. David McMillan of Princeton University, US, Dr. David Julius of the University of California, San Francisco in the US, and Dr. Artem Pataputian of the Scripps Research Institute in the United States. This year's Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine and Chemistry both recognize how crucial the role of human behavior is in climate change. This is an enormously important topic that affects all our lives as well as the planet we all live in, the Earth. I look forward to today's event and lively discussions, which I have no doubt will be very thought-provoking. I would like to thank all the participants for today's program and wish them all a great opportunity to learn from one another's great wisdom and ideas. Thank you very much.
Good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Eva Weiberg, and I'm the president of the University of Gothenburg. I'm honored and proud that my university is part of this excellent Nobel Memorial Program. And I wish that I could have been with you in person to take part of the presentations. Due to the pandemic, this is of course not possible. The pandemic has brought us many challenges. Perhaps the most important of all for the higher education community is for us to preserve and nurture global conversations, like this one between Sweden and South Korea. The University of Gothenburg is a broad and comprehensive university with a strong research focus. One of our strongest research areas is within political science and in public opinion, democracy and elections. In this field of political science, there is also an established research collaboration with Yonsei University. The collaboration is also strong within education, where the university has exchanged 200 students with Korean universities over the years. We are hoping that this is only the beginning of an intensified collaboration in education and research with the Korean higher education community. The Nobel Prizes are the greatest celebrations of science. In the year of 2000, the same year when Kim Dae-jung from South Korea was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, Arvid Carlsson, Professor Emeritus at the University of Gothenburg, was one of 3 laureates in physiology medicine. A celebration of science, truth and facts, such as the Nobel Prizes, are of increased importance in challenging times when the international community must act jointly to fight a pandemic. It is with pleasure and pride I see the development of this joint collaboration between our 2 countries. I hope to meet you all in person in Korea during next year's Nobel Memorial Program.
KTH is happy to be partner in this event, and in times like this, it is even more important to keep connected. KTH is the oldest and largest technical university in Sweden with attractive education and world-leading research. KTH is an international university with some 30% of faculty having international background. Yearly, we have an inflow of about 1,000 international students. Korea is important to KTH for further exchange of students and more of excellent research collaborations. With KTH being an international leading engineering university, we'd like to deepen our collaboration as Korea is a world-leading nation in engineering and innovation. I see many similarities and mutual interests. I would like to see more Swedish students going to Korea to tap into the world-leading education and research, but also to learn more about the Korean culture. In the coming years, I'd like to see more research collaborations and more of academia-industry collaborations. Being a part of this Nobel Memorial Program, I just have to take the possibility to tell you about a real pride for KTH. Hannes Alfvén. He is our first but not last Nobel laureate. Professor Alfvén got the Nobel Physics Prize in 1970, and he's considered a pioneer in the field of plasma physics, and his discoveries play a crucial role in today's space research. I have visited Korea a couple of times, and it's a fascinating country. Already in 2013, I joined a delegation of Swedish rectors who visited a large number of excellent universities in the Seoul area. I have really enjoyed my stays. I was impressed by the high quality of the universities and the amazing labs for experimental research. I look forward to once again come back to Korea in real life. For us at KTH, this event is an opportunity to further engage KTH in deeper discussions to increase the ties with your wonderful country.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Lund University, I wish you a warm welcome to the Nobel Memorial Symposia. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic that has plagued the world for a year and a half, academic institutions all over the world are in the process of contemplating the lessons learned and trying to navigate in a partially new landscape. All over the globe, decision makers and us academics try to articulate the clearest idea about how to move forward after the pandemic. Frequently, the center stage of these plans is occupied by us and what we do: education, science and innovation. Sweden has a long and solid reputation as a country where the value of innovation and research is highly regarded. The Nobel Prizes are excellent testimonies to this notion. Personally, I feel strongly about this year's prize in physiology or medicine. Myself being an MD, PhD and ion channel researcher, I'm in awe of the achievements of David Julius and Arden Petaputian for the discoveries of the receptors for temperature and touch. Swedes admire great advances in science, medicine, arts and appreciate their importance for building a sustainable and democratic society. Therefore, South Korea is a country that we feel close affinity to. You cherish the same values about important matters in life and nurture science and innovation. We all hope to be able to meet you in person soon again to strengthen the bonds between our countries. I wish you all a stupendous meeting.
Dear friends of Korea and Sweden, my name is Hans Adolfsson and I'm the Vice Chancellor of Umeå University. We are very happy to be part of the second Swedish-Korean Nobel Memorial Program today. Last year, Emmanuelle Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the groundbreaking discovery of the CRISPR-Cas9 genetic scissors, one of gene technology's sharpest tools. At the time of the discovery, Emmanuelle Charpentier was a visiting professor at Umeå University. She often mentioned Umeå as a place where she really could focus on her research and that the university provided a great platform for networking and sharing ideas. Umeå University's strong research areas include, for example, global health, infection biology, plant and forest biotechnology, aging and population studies, and Arctic research. The university campuses encourage cross-border meetings between students, researchers, teachers, and external parties alike. Through close collaboration with local and international stakeholders, we contribute in making new and exciting things possible in society. This is of critical importance now, when we experience a huge sustainable industrial development in the north of Sweden, building plants for car batteries and green steel production. Umeå University has been collaborating with the Embassy in Seoul since 2013. We currently have 7 partner universities in Korea and would like to develop further partnerships and to extend the relationships regarding research collaborations. I personally had the opportunity to visit Seoul in 2014 and it was a great experience. Therefore, I do look forward to visit Korea again soon as it's possible. And hopefully next year's Nobel Memorial Program physically can take place in Seoul. In the meantime, I hope that you will enjoy this year's program and do take care.
Thank you very much for those messages. We hope that next year we can welcome each of you here in Seoul. Let's move to the first session, which is on physiology or medicine. And that must be the most important of the Nobel Awards, I think, because it focuses on health and care and well-being, and what could possibly be more important than that? And the first speaker is going to be from Sweden, live early in the morning, earliest of all today, Professor Mattias Uhlén. Professor Uhlén is a renowned academic with impressive scientific achievements. He is also a serial entrepreneur and innovator. He holds some 80 patents and has started more than 20 companies, and at least one of them is active here in Seoul. And he is the founder of the SciLife Lab and the Human Protein Atlas, and both are important institutions of the Swedish scientific infrastructure. Please welcome Professor Mattias Uhlén.
So, thank you very much, and I would like to present the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine at this Nobel Memorial Program. Like the other speakers, I'm very sad that we're not in South Korea this year, but I'm looking forward to next year's memorial program. I'm a professor at the Royal Institute of Technology, but also at the Karolinska Institute. I have visited Korea many times, and I have a lot of friends there, both in science and also other social friends. And I am very happy to then be speaking at this program. So the Nobel Prize in 2021 in Physiology or Medicine is awarded jointly to David Julius and Ardem Patapoyan for the discovery of receptors for temperature and touch. But before I go into their achievements, I would like to just give you a brief outline of how the Nobel Prize in Medicine is awarded. This prize is elected by the Karolinska Institutet. In the will from Alfred Nobel, he explicitly said that one of the science prizes will go to medicine, and this will be awarded by the assembly, the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska Institute. And I just show you, and you can see actually the will here up to the right. You can also see one of the first Nobel assemblies at the Karolinska back in 1910. The sort of annual cycle of the selection procedure is quite comprehensive. It sort of starts with the deadline of submissions in January, and these are then evaluated during the spring. And then in June and July, the evaluation work is progressing, and then in September, the Nobel Committee submits recommendations, but it's only after a majority vote in the Nobel Assembly at the Karolinska that the Nobel Prize is announced the first Monday in October every year. And then the Nobel Prize award ceremony is at the 10th of December. And for the medicine prize, they are then giving their lecture at the Karolinska Institute. This year's science prize then is about human feel, heat, and touch. And the two awardees has separately from each other been trying to understand how we humans feel heat and feel touch. And this is, of course, very important for how we see the world. So if we start with David Julius, he and his co-workers created a library of millions of DNA fragments corresponding to the genes that are expressed in the sensory neurons. And what they could do is to finally, after a lot of work, to identify a single gene that was able to make cells sensitive to the active ingredient in chili, capsaicin, and which caused this burning sensation that we feel when we come into contact with chili pepper. And using that, then they could identify this gene and this protein that actually then is responsible for feeling heat. The other awardee, Ardem Pataputian, he and his co-workers, and he was at La Jolla in California, succeeded in identifying a single gene, those silencing, when you cut it off, render the cells insensitive to poking with a micropipette. And after a lot of work, they could then conclude that this gene, actually it's two genes that was identified, these were then responsible for how we feel touch. Sorry. The discovery of these receptors for heat and touch, then together they constitute now a rather remarkable insight in how we humans feel heat and touch and the senses. So what is then the benefit for mankind of this? Well, obviously, the discovery has profoundly changed our view on how we sense the world around us. The groundbreaking discovery by this year's Nobel Prize laureates have allowed us to understand how heat, cold, and mechanical forces can initiate the nerve impulses that allow us to perceive and adapt the world around us. And this is not only benefit for understanding human biology, but it's also, of course, important when you have diseases involving touch, heat, temperature, and so on. So this is truly, I think, a worthy prize.
This is the inner ear. It is one of the smallest, yet one of the most important organs in our bodies. The functions of the inner ear are multiple. It consists of the cochlea, responsible for our hearing, and the vestibular system, responsible for our balance. Damage to the inner ear can not only lead to a loss of hearing, but also imbalance, tinnitus, and vision impairment. With these 3D images, it's possible to really appreciate the beauty and complexity of the inner ear.
So this was just an example of the wonderful role of senses that we have created a sort of a journey into the human body, and in this case, the inner ear for hearing. So in conclusion then, I just wanted to conclude by saying that this year's Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded jointly to David Julius and Ardem Pataputian for their discoveries of receptors for temperature and touch. And I think this is a very worthy prize. And I thank you for your attention. And I hope then to see you all in South Korea when we celebrate next year's prize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ullén, and I hope you remain with us for the panel discussion in a couple of minutes. But first, I would like to introduce up to the stage the next important speaker, Sun Wook Wang, please, while you have a seat. I'm going to introduce you. Professor Wang received his degree at Seoul National University and is now at Korea University College of Medicine, where he is the head of Department of Biomedical Sciences. He also has been a research scholar at the Scripps Research Institute and Harvard Medical School. Very warmly welcome to you, Professor Wang. Please.
Yeah. Sorry. 네, 친절한 소개 감사드립니다.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Today, I hope to touch upon the historical context of this year's Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. I think for more than a century, many outstanding scientists from diverse fields have contributed to the research and study of the senses. And I think Professor Julius and Professor Pataputian are at the height of that legacy. On this side, you will see pictures of leading scholars. There are quite a few of them, and you may notice that there are quite a few Swedish and Korean scientists, and it is in this regard that this year's award is all the more significant. Of course, I think it all began with the study of physiology. Physiology built a solid foundation for the research of senses. Here you can see the pioneers of sense research from the end of the 19th century to early and mid-20th century. Among them are Blix and Zoderman, outstanding Swedish scientists. By this time, many experiments on measuring somatic temperature and touch senses had been done, and sensory neurons had been discovered. And in fact, a German professor, Max von Frey, invented a touch simulator machine that has been modernized and automated and is in active use even today. However, at the time, it was not easy to identify the touch and heat receptor molecules, technologically speaking, and in terms of technique, it was not easy. From the 60s to 90s, pharmacology and medical chemistry started playing a major role. The field realized the usefulness of capsaicin, which is a key component in chili peppers. The Hungarian scientists, who are also a couple, Jancho and Jancho Galver, their student, Professor János Csócsányi, and Swedish Professor Fekfelt made huge contributions. They discovered when injected with capsaicin, the sensory nerves are stimulated, triggering pain, and when injected in high concentrations, the sensory nerves became incapacitated, leading to a pain-killing effect. So, capsaicin is actually used as a painkiller in some of the diseases, and this basic concept was established by these scholars. And a lot of capsaicin derivatives were also invented in the 90s. Scientists at Sandoz, currently Novartis, Professor Peter Blumberg, and also SNU Professor EGU made large contributions in inventing capsaicin derivatives. In a sense, a decoy substance used in discovering the receptors were secured at this time. And the first blueprint using capsaicin was finally published in the 1996 Journal of Neuroscience. Professor Oh Taek, myself, and Professor Kim Dong-hee of the Rosalind Franklin Medical School successfully detected the TRPV1 functions from sensory nerves. And we use the patch clamp technique in our experiments. This was also the legacy of the 1991 Nobel Prize laureates of physiology and medicine, Professor Neher and Sakman. However, we could not find the TPRV protein or gene itself. And I think that Professor Julius's team solved a lot of the problems that he was faced with the blueprint. And he also used calcium fluorescent technology to speed up his research. And the results were compared with the blueprint of 1996 that we published. And Michael Katrina and the professor from Japan, Tominaga, made also big contributions. And I believe that they are currently professors at a research institute in the US. And Professor Julius actually established a theory that TRPV1 could also be a high-temperature sensing receptor. Already, many physiologists had discovered that among sensory nerves, there are some that react to diverse stimuli. In other words, he figured maybe TRPV1 was responsible for our ability to sense different impulses. We often say something is hot when it is extremely spicy, so in retrospect, it seems like a natural, obvious idea. And if you look on the right-hand side, you can see that this was published in Nature, and it also made the cover. And because the general public is also familiar with the hotness of the chili pepper, I think it also drew a lot of attention from non-experts, from the general public. And furthermore, Professor Axel, who discovered the olfactory receptor, was also used for the discovery that was awarded this year. And it also used fluorescence imaging developed by Roger Sen, Nobel Prize laureate for chemistry in 2008, and this Cairo electron microscopy, which led to the finding of the TRPV1, was also used. And so you could say that so many different sciences came together to complete this achievement in physiology. And the convergence of these techniques, and added here, bioinformatics, led to the discovery of cold temperature receptor, TRPM8. By using bioinformatics, TPRV1 was extracted and checked for a menthol response. And the discovery of TRPM8 is interesting, that it is a simultaneous discovery which happens every once in a while in science. Dr. Julius's paper was published and decorated the cover of Nature on March 7th, and Dr. Pataputian's paper was published and was on the cover of Cell on March 8th. It has also served as an inspiration in the discovery of new ion channels. I think one of the most biggest achievements is that it gave way to translational research. Sweden professors Högest and Zygmunt's team discovered that TRPV1 reacts to the body's various endogenous modulators, thus aggravating pain disease. And based on this discovery, the team established the concept that TRPV1 is a pain-killing target. And Professor Lee Ji-hoo, who I mentioned earlier, along with Professor Choi Sun of Ewha Women's University, are currently collaborating to design a computation-based TRPV1 painkiller. It also served as an inspiration in the discovery of new ion channels. Professor Oh Wook discovered anoctamin. Myself and Professor Bill Schaefer of the MRC of Cambridge have discovered TMC, and we published this work in Nature in 2008 and 2013, respectively. And surprisingly, Professor Jeff Holt is already discovering that TMC1 and 2, which are a type of TMC that are olfactory receptors, sound receptors. The molecular machine that detects sound is very complicated, so there's still some way to go, but I believe this work is also making its way toward a Nobel Prize. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, research that is currently led by Harvard University professor Jeffrey Holt. Now let me move on to the story of piezo. The legacy is similar to that of TPRV1. It builds on the work of many previous scientists, and Professor Ed Paul, Professor Kuma Waza, and many psychophysicists have led their achievements to the discovery. And also when it comes to the biophysics area, many mechanosensitive ion channels were also discovered. And so these were huge contributions in establishing experiment methods that led to the discovery of piezo. But when it comes to piezo, they did not have a useful substance like capsaicin. So patch clamps had to be done on each cell of each protein. Professor Pataputian used bioinformatics to reduce the candidates, but it took Professor Bertrand Coste 1 year to test all the candidates one by one. And of the 73 candidates, he hit the jackpot on number 72. At the time, Korean scientist Kim Sung-eun published an article on Nature that piezo also contributes to touch sensory. This blueprint on the left-hand side cannot be overlooked either. Professor Oh's team came up with this blueprint in 2002, and Professor Cho conducted patch clamp techniques a whopping 2,962 times. As I mentioned earlier, Professor Cost actually had to test all the candidates for almost a year, so I think it took her almost a year too. So both cases illustrate that success is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, and that is what Thomas Edison said. Don't you think these images look like blooming flowers? The protein tertiary structure was completed by Dr. Pataputian's team and Professor Bailang Shao, who was his student. So Professor Shao is very active in this realm of research. And Dr. Rock McKinnon, who received the Nobel Prize of Chemistry in 2003, also contributed with an independent study on piezo protein. What is especially interesting is that before piezo was discovered, it was thought in physiology that various mechanosensitive receptors were in play in each tissue of the human body. Also, when piezo 1 and 2 were discovered, they were thought to be in charge of cognitive touch, but it turns out piezo 1 and 2 are in play in most tissue in our body that expands, contracts, and flows. So in fact, it is at work in terms of blood pressure, the growth of our bones, the expansion of our bladder. Even more shocking is that piezo plays an important role in the growth of plant roots. You can see the diagrams that elaborate this. And Dr. Min-Soo Hong is actually prolific in reporting about the role of piezo2 in blood pressure control, and he has submitted many papers in many high-profile journals. So I think that the sensor receptors were discovered as many different fields of science all came together in this melting pot of physiology. This discovery is giving birth to a new field called translational science, and it is transforming physiology itself. And I think that this is a really good example of how convergence and divergence of many different fields can lead to notable achievements. And I took a look at the historical context. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. Very interesting. And thank you, Professor Erlén, as well. Good to see you there, both of you. So, from your presentation, Dr. Wang, I understand the importance of legacy in this kind of research. You can see you mentioned the Nobel Awards from '91 and research that you were doing in '96, and then the things that were happening in '97. And it seems the DNA research genetic research have been very important for these results. But the findings here are not the DNA, but the findings are this sensory apparatus. Could you talk a little bit about how that works when they turn DNA on and off and the knowledge to acquire that ability to finding the sensory apparatus that they did?
굉장히 좋은 질문이시고요. 그게 이제 기술적으로는 제가 오늘 언급을 미처 못했습니다.
I did not go into the technical details, but that is a very good question. In 2006 and 2007, there were Nobel laureates of RNA interference. And it was used in discovering piezo1 and TRPV1. So turning on and off genes is a technology that was used for this year's work. So TRPV1 and piezo, the DNA fragment library, however, was comprised based on the genius of Dr. Julius and Dr. Pataputian. In order to select these DNA fragments, they figured that in order to decipher touch, that protein cells on the outer boundaries of the cells will be used. So I think that their deduction was key in this discovery.
Weigh in on this question as well.
Well, it's a little bit hard because I only heard this in Korean. But I think it is important that both of these Nobel Prizes are awarded to basic research. And I think it is very important to point out that basic research is very important for us to actually promote and understand human biology and then in the end medicine. And I think that we are fortunate enough, both in South Korea and Sweden, to have government that for a long time has been promoting basic science as part of the governmental funding. And I think this is important not only for us to actually increase our understanding, but also as a basis for making this a better world to live. So I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question completely.
No, that's perfectly fine. I didn't know that you couldn't hear it in English. But I have another question for you relating to that, because what you're mentioning is tremendously important about having the research environment. And these guys, the winners are obviously not the individuals that have been doing all this work on their own, but they have teams, they have labs. What kind of environment do you need to have to do research like this? How large must the lab be? What kind of funding do you need to have? Do you need to have long-term free funding or a company asking you to find something specific? What would you say is the most conducive environment for this kind of research? Professor Len.
If I start then, I think this is a very important question, and I don't think that there is a magical formula for countries how to do this, except for promoting excellence and quality in research and promote quality and excellence. Myself, I've been running a very big program, the Human Protein Atlas, where we've had hundreds of people involved through the years. But I still want to point out that most of the groups in the Protein Atlas has been rather small, maybe 5 or 6 people. And the beauty then is networking and collaboration. And this is not only then, in this case in Sweden, but also internationally. So I think the magic formula, so to say, is to be able then to collaborate outside borders and actually then make good quality research. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. A small team, a smallish team with good international collaboration. Professor Wang, do you agree with this description? And do you see that there are these environments also available, not just here in Korea, but the places which you are familiar with?
네, 물론입니다. 지금 제가 생각하기에는 그 국제적인
I think networking between scientists and research labs is very important. I think one of the best cases can be found in Sweden. I'm currently with the Korea University School of Medicine, and we are in regular exchange with the Karolinska Institute related to immunology. And in October, we actually held a joint seminar with the Karolina Institute. And I think that this sort of experience is very important in furthering the development of science at our school. So we need more collaboration in more comprehensive fields with more diverse partners, and that is my hope.
Okay, interesting. I have a bit of a technical question for both of you also, because this topic is, of course, something that everybody can relate to, with pain and pleasure and pain, you could say. And I was curious when I heard about the research and what they had found, that there was a sensor that actually reacted from 43 degrees Celsius. So while I don't know about you, but I experience pain as something on a scale from very little to very much. It's not in steps, so to speak. So are there different pain sensors for different temperature degrees or for different pressure levels? Or is there something with these sensors that can make them send an analog signal, so to speak, a continuous, do you understand my question? It's a layman's question. I'm sorry about that.
제가 말씀을 드려야 될 것 같은데요.
I will attempt to answer the question. I actually am looking at temperature receptors that are triggered by certain temperature ranges from 34 degrees, 33 degrees, and 26 degrees. And we also look at receptors that respond at 17 degrees. But it usually has to be over 43 degrees or below 17 degrees for a person to recognize this change in temperature as a pain. So we are currently researching the temperature or pain sensation within the 17 to 43 degrees range. And because the nerve cells are in charge of detecting this, there is that barrier that the skin provides, so it cannot be fixed at 43 degrees or 17 degrees. That is why the pain sensation is subjective. The pain actually has to be relayed to the nerve cell, and that is why there is a subjective difference to how you feel pain.
Also comment on your question, which I think is a very good one, is that both of these awardees has done pioneering work, and that is why they are awarded the Nobel Prize. Pioneering work showing the exact receptors that are responsible for heat and touch. But as you alluded, obviously this is not the end. Science will continue. This is like they have opened one door, or actually two doors then, and behind those doors are a lot of other doors that will then in the future make us understand human senses better and better. And I do think that if I'm a young scientist today, I think life science and medical research would be a very good place to be, since there are so many doors to open, and these will be open in the next 50 years. And this will be very exciting for research to understand human biology and medicine.
And the results of this research, I'm guessing it already has led to some new treatment methods for pain, to deal with pain. Is that true, Professor Ulén?
There are, of course, a lot of developments now in the pharmaceutical industry in order to use this and also other discoveries. And obviously, pain in different forms is, of course, one of the most difficult parts of human medicine. And obviously, this and many other discoveries will be very important for the pharmaceutical industry to develop better treatments and better drugs.
Okay, thank you. We need to wrap up, but I would like to ask you just a very quick question. We have a lot of students following these sessions, and I wonder if you have a brief advice to students that have an interest in these areas, maybe that are aspiring to one day win a Nobel Award as well. What would you say, Professor?
굉장히 어려운 질문.
Actually, that is a very difficult question to answer. Sometimes I tell my students that engaging in research and being in science is like hiking. You have a basic desire to get to the top of the mountain, and sometimes you want to enjoy a nice hiking route. But what I tell them is that if you keep your eye on the peak of the mountain excessively, then it is too difficult. Sometimes you might end up taking the wrong route, but then this may lead you to a peak of a different mountain. So I tell them to enjoy it a bit.
If I just also comment on your question then. So as I said, I think life science and medical research is in a very vibrant time right now, and I think this will be very, very good field for anyone trying to have a research career. I also must say I've been many times in South Korea. I've been working with a lot of institute, in particular KAIST and Sang-Yap Lee with metabolic modeling here in South Korea, but also been working a lot with therapeutic antibodies as part of the company in South Korea, Upclone, and gifted scientist Seo Lee. And I think that the quality of science in this field in South Korea is so outstanding. So I think that I really hope that in the future we will see a lot of Nobel Prize winners from South Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let that be the last words on this session, on that very hopeful note. Thank you very much, Professor Wang and Professor Ullén, for participating. And I'm going to move on. Thank you so much. Hang around to the end of the sessions. We're going to move on to the next category, the next prize category, which is physics. I think you can safely say that physics is the most important of the prize categories because it concerns the rule of the universe and it aspires to have a theory of everything, and what could possibly be more important than that? I don't know. I think it's a fascinating area. And I want to introduce the Swedish speaker now, Professor Ludwig Lisana. Good morning, Professor Lisana. I hope you're with us.
Yeah, I am. Thank you.
Fantastic. Professor Lisana is a theoretical physicist and was earlier at New York University and the Niels Bohr Institute. And now he's working at the ICE lab, the Integrated Sciences Lab at Umeå University. And there he works with physicists, mathematicians, and theoretical ecologists with interdisciplinary modeling. And he also has a grant to work with Korean colleagues, and I hope we will hear some more about that. Very welcome, Professor Ludwig Lisana, to talk about this year's award on physics.
Thank you. This works?
We see you and we hear you, and we see the slides.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, so first I want to thank the organizers for giving me the chance to talk about this year's Nobel Prize in physics. And as Anders Hector pointed out, my background is in statistical mechanics and also biological physics, so it makes sense for me to focus a bit more on Giorgio Parisi's work. So in this talk, I will mention three things. I will talk about his extreme intuition, I will talk about his breakthrough idea, and also I will touch on some of his interdisciplinary works, which inspires me personally. So whenever I read Paris's work, also listen to colleagues talking about him, you listen to talks by him, you read interviews by him. So what strikes me is his extraordinary intuition about physical systems. And as some of you might know, Parisi, he studied disordered magnetic systems, so-called spin glasses. And when he came up with this breakthrough idea that earned him this year's Nobel Prize, both physicists and mathematicians, they had worked on this problem for about a decade. And it was clear that it was very challenging. But to solve the problem, he didn't use more sophisticated math. He thought differently about this problem. He had a completely new approach. He proposed a solution a bit sort of like out of thin air, And it took mathematicians close to 20 years to figure out that he was actually right. The proof came in 2001, so fairly recently. His idea was revolutionary, and his contributions, it opened up the field and also led to breakthroughs in other areas. And when people asked him how he came up with this grand idea, he simply answered, I don't know. True or not, so what stands out to me is, again, not his extreme math skills, even though they were likely very good, but it's his intuition about physics. And it was his intuition that allowed him to crack this extremely complicated problem in theoretical and complex systems. So next, I would like to touch a little bit more on what he actually did. And the chances are that some of you are not too familiar with spin glass systems and disordered magnetic materials. So therefore, I will explain his breakthrough idea in terms of a simpler system that I think most of you are more familiar with. And that is a social network, and how opinions spread among individuals talking with each other. So now consider this. So this is a little social network where there is one person, and in this network, people can have two opinions, either yes or no. So in Paris's language, it would be like magnets that point in one direction, say up, or in another, say down. So when she is forming an opinion, she's listening to the opinion of her friends, and they influence her in a way that she wants to have the same opinion as her friends. So in this case, it's pretty easy. Everybody in her surroundings have the opinion yes, so she will also take the opinion yes. The opposite will also work, where everybody has the opinion no, she would also have the opinion no. There can be some randomness in the system where some people have yes and some people have no, but then she will make like a uniform, she will weigh in the opinions of a different people. But so when physicists study this type of systems, what we are interested in is under which conditions do we see a global uniform opinion spreading across the whole system? So when are all people having the yes opinion or the no opinion, and how this depends on how strong the different interactions are, let's say the strengths of these links. So what we do is that we look at the free energy of the system. So if you plot the free energy as a function of different yes-no configurations that people might have, then you see that there are two states that minimizes the free energy. And these are exactly all the people that either say no or either say yes. And what this means in practice is that if we prepare our social network where there are randomized opinions that say yes and no, and then we use a simulation or just let people talk, then this whole system will trickle down into either all yes or all no states. Okay, but now to make the system a little bit more similar to what Paris actually studied, we need to consider links that are not just positive in the sense that she wants to have the same opinion as her friends. She can also have a different opinion than some friends. So here I show this as red links. So now in this case, if he has the opinion yes, she wants to have no. So when you have a situation like this, then everything becomes much more complicated because she can be in a frustrated state. Some of her friends says yes, others says no, but then she will take the opposite of that. So she can be in a very frustrated state. And when you have a situation like this, and then you look at what the energies of different configurations are, the energy landscape will be extremely rugged and rough. So there are all these minimas where there is a lot of frustration. And when you want to analyze, let's say, the macroscopic behavior of how a typical social network will look like, or in Paris's case, it would be a disordered magnet, then you need to take account of all these states in these minimas. And that was his main idea. Okay, that you need to consider all these minima states and somehow combine them to understand what the average behavior would look like. And what he studied then was different configuration. He called them replicas. And he came up with an idea that he wanted to study how similar replicas are in these different minima. I show a few examples here to the right, where each entry is just an opinion of the different person, and where I just in boldface I highlight the differences. So his main idea now was to say that, okay, I propose that I can write down the free energy that physicists want so much. And by the way, the reason we want it is because if we have thermodynamic relations, we can calculate everything that we want about the system as long as we have the free energy. So he said that I can write down the free energy by looking at the overlaps of different replicas in different minima. And that's what he did. And this was his paper in 1979. That took mathematician 20 years to figure out that he was actually right. And he did something else which was extraordinary. He could actually group the different replicas depending on how close they were to each other. And he grouped them into an ancestral tree that I tried to depict here. It's called an ultrametric tree. So let's say now this line here, it's representation of, again, the free energy. And now we have weak interactions in our system. So this means, weak interactions between different individuals, which means that now in this case, we only have one state. But as the interaction becomes stronger, the states actually split into more states. So you can have more states, and the frustration would just go up. And then if the interactions increase even more, then you get even more states. So you see this whole hierarchy of different states that are related to each other in this type of hierarchical tree. And what he did was he could actually calculate the overlap between different states in this so-called ultrametric tree. And he did it in a systematic way. And then from this here, he could calculate the free energy of the system, which people were after. So I realized that this part was maybe a little bit on the technical side, but the take-home message here is that if you have a disordered magnetic system, or in our case, a social network, there's a lot of frustration. So, and if you want to look at the macroscopic behavior of this type of system, they need to consider lots of states at the same time. He figured out a way to combine them and then look at the overlap between different states, and then could calculate like the free energy. Okay, so in the last part, I want to touch a little bit on his interdisciplinary work. So Parisi, he's most well known for his work on spin glasses and magnetic systems, but he has worked on turbulence, he has worked on surface growth, he has worked on quantum chromodynamics, he has worked on stochastic resonance, he even has a climate model in a paper with more than 1,000 citations, where he used stochastic resonance to actually predict variations in the climate. He's also looked at flocking of birds. So in this picture that you see here is a cloud of starlings. And these starlings form these amazing shapes. And this is not dictated by any particular leader bird. It's a self-organization of birds, and they orient themselves to each other according to the orientation of their neighbors. So it's sort of like a spin glass system. When the Nobel Prize Committee phoned him and let him know that he was awarded the prize, they asked about this interdisciplinary work. And so I took this transcript from the interview, and specifically they asked, so what is it about the specific problem that attracts you, since you have worked in so many different fields? He has some answer here, which I don't think it's that thought through, but what strikes me is that he mentions the word fun several times. So it seems like the fun and the joy of doing good science is something that drives him. He elaborates a little bit more later on that we also want to work on meaningful problems that are of interest to other people. But this resonates with me in my work so well, so to the core. So as Anders Schechter pointed out, even I'm a physicist, I'm working with problems in cell biology. And I'm also part of a research group called Integrated Science Lab, and we are 20 different researchers coming from different backgrounds. There's, as Anders pointed out, there's computer science, there's physics, there's math, there's molecular biology, and there's also theoretical ecology. And we work on our own individual problems, but we share methods, we share approaches to make progress on our own research. So to wrap up the talk, this is a picture by Parisi taken a few years ago at his 70 years birthday that I got from a colleague. So to me, what stands out about Parisi is his extreme intuition for physics. And this ability, this allowed him to solve a very challenging problem in theoretical physics. that turned the field in a new direction and led to breakthroughs in other areas. And for the love of working on farm problems, he also endeavored into other disciplines. He is a physicist that inspires me, and I think that you will find him inspiring too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lisana. That was very interesting and inspiring. And this is a good session in several ways. One of the ways is that we have now heard a presentation of one of the winners, and we have another participant, Professor Emeritus In-Sik Kang. Please welcome and join me up on the stage here. Nice to meet you. Professor Kang has a long and distinguished career where he, as a young researcher, did a postdoc at the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics lab at Princeton and came in 1986 to Seoul National University. And you didn't have any reasons really to leave Seoul National, so you remained there. And he has published more than 170 papers in climate science journals with 12,000 citations related to climate modeling and global climate changes. With recognition of his scientific achievements, he was awarded the 2021 International Meteorological Organization Prize. We're very happy to have you here, Professor. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It is very awkward to me to make presentation. This uncomfortable sitting.
Please stand up.
Can I stand up?
Of course.
I will stand up. It is really my honor to introduce the other half of Nobel Prize in Physics. The winners are Shukro Manabe and Klaus Hasselmann for their outstanding and pioneering work on climate modeling and global warming. Many people ask why it is in physics, Nobel Prize in Physics. This is computational modeling of global climate based on geophysical fluid dynamics and atmospheric physics. It is kind of expansion of Newtonian dynamics, classical Newtonian dynamics, to global warming and future climate prediction. I think everybody knows that greenhouse warming is the most challenging, most important human problem these days and in 21st century, I think. That's why today, Global Climate Summit is going on in Glasgow, UK, and G20 presidents, including our president and the US president and G20 president, are there in Glasgow today. They are talking about the challenge to global climate change. This science requires global observation network for a long time. Not simply for a few years, but for several decades, using state-of-the-art technology, all available state-of-the-art technologies, satellite, radar, ship, and many others, and the fastest supercomputers, so that this science is very expensive science with strong international collaboration. But 60 years ago, in 1960s, without much data, and the computer at the time, was a very infant state. But Manabe, Dr. Manabe and Hasselmann started to work on this challenging problem, and they made a climate model. I'll talk about their achievement later. But anyway, with a very, infant state of the technology, they actually initiated the great work, which is most influential to modern human being. So that is their greatness. Since I have working experience with Dr. Manabe, but I don't have much experience with Hasselmann, so I will focus more on Manabe. I think Hasselmann is similar kind of person, like Manabe. So I will more focus on first Manabe. And at that time, my stay in GFDL Princeton University, Dr. Manabe was head of my group, so that I have many experience talking with his private character, and he advised me about to be a great scientist, and also I know his science history. So I'm going to introduce Manabe. First of all, for his basic character, he's a very cheerful person with a lot of curiosity. And a previous speaker, he mentioned about fun-driven science. I think Shuki Manabe is the kind of person. And I will very briefly introduce Manabe's achievement. He received his PhD in 1958 from University of Tokyo, and after that he moved to U.S. Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C., and worked at the General Circulation Research Unit. And a couple of years later, the unit moved to Princeton University in 1960, and he also moved to Princeton University. And the unit becomes a U.S. national lab. And now it is NOAA Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory in Princeton University. Why they moved to Princeton University is because the first computer was made by Professor von Neumann in Princeton University in early 1950. And their team of people actually applied their computer to weather forecasting. That was their first task. And using a very simple model, very simple geophysical fluid dynamics model, but Manabe's team wants to make a global comprehensive atmospheric general circulation model, including atmospheric physics like radiation and cloud and many other things. So that it is, their ambition was really, really great at that time. I will show some of the complexity, cloud radiation interaction. This is still a most uncertain problem in nowadays. So people talking about uncertainty of global warming. Most uncertainty comes from cloud formulation and the interaction with radiation. This is a very complex phenomena, and this is what they formulated at the time. And using this model, they assessed the impact of greenhouse gases on global mean temperature. And they found that CO2 and H2O are most important gases to maintain global temperature. And then they further developed global coupled ocean atmosphere model with the ocean modeler, Koch-Bryan, and they established global ocean atmosphere coupled model, which is now global climate model. And that is first model of global climate model in the world. And they estimated greenhouse warming using this comprehensive global coupled model for double the CO2 condition. And the magnitude of greenhouse warming estimated by Manabe's team is almost same as the magnitude produced by state-of-art coupled model these days. So it is great that they started, but they made really reasonable model, and then they initiated greenhouse warming science. After this model, world science community attention on greenhouse warming, and then greenhouse warming becomes most important problem of the human being these days. Of course, a lot of great works afterward, but I will introduce most significant impacts work by Professor Manabe now. And then, because only 10 minutes, so that I want to talk about very briefly about Manabe's Nobel Prize implying to our young scientists. Of course, basic character is important, so that they have to have a lot of curiosity and learning character from everybody. I think all great scientists have such kind of basic character. But I like to emphasize not only character, but also this thing is really important. Needs some long time. Needs some long time for dedicating and building his own expertise, or their own expertise in younger period. I will mention Manabe's case in the next slide. I think we need a good professor, of course, for the knowledge, and a big supporter to have his own free time to make his own expertise, to build his own science. Maybe this is Manabe's case. This is what Manabe told me when I was there. Manabe didn't have any publication for about 5 years in his early career in 1960s. For him to dedicate and develop a global general circulation model, which became a basis for his future great work. And at that time, great scientist, Dr. Smagorensky, he was the director of the institution, and he continuously talked to him, do whatever you want. And he was interested in building complex climate model, so that he continuously made effort, so that he didn't make any publication for 5 years. I mean, these days, everybody try to publish many papers in younger period, spending so much time for so many papers and projects. I'm asking to the society, is it possible these days? I think it is very difficult in Korea in particular, but everywhere in the world. I think this is because of many system problem, funding problems, and many others. But I don't have any solution for this. But I think seniors have to think about how we find out some good, talented young scientists, finding a young scientist, and giving some free time for them to grow and support. I don't know how to make such things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's an excellent question, and maybe we should pick up that particular question, because Professor Lisanna, you also mentioned that. No, you didn't mention that, but I read it that Pirsig had his breakthrough result, and then it took him several years before it mathematically was proven. So it would have been a long time where maybe he was unsure about whether this was actually correct, or could he continue working on it, or did he have to put it aside to get research, to get funded research done instead? Do you know what the situation was for him when it comes to that? In the meantime, before it was proven, how did he deal with that?
So I tried to ask a couple of colleagues that know him personally if he was sort of frustrated, but he doesn't strike me as a frustrated person at all. So if we look at his work, he definitely continued working on the problem, and I think that he was sure that he was right, to be honest. That's a short answer. But he also worked on a different problem, as I mentioned. So he went into different disciplines. But I still think that it's my impression that he kept working on his spin glass problem, looking at different aspects, developing the theory a little bit more, get new insights.
And then if it wasn't proven, then could he publish on that research in the meantime?
Yeah, sure. I mean, his paper from 1979 that is one of the core papers to the prize, he basically said that I propose that this is the solution. And this is a very short paper, 3 pages long, I think. And it's very different now if you look at papers in Nature and Science, they are so big and there's so much work. So his style was very different, but it's different times then. But yeah, he could definitely publish his work.
Very different, probably. I mean, we're celebrating winners here today, the ones that proved to be right. And you mentioned he was working for 5 years when he didn't publish anything. And you're asking the question, is that possible today? Probably not. You're indicating that yourself. Would we want it to be possible? Is another question we can ask. And in retrospect, if somebody is doing radical, innovative, creative work, and history will show that it's right, yes, of course. But many times, maybe it will be wrong. Maybe I will be doing my research and I'm off on a tangent and it's not relevant, and I would need checkpoints. What do you think, Professor? Do you think it should be possible to not publish in 5 years and still have funding available?
As I said, it may be very difficult. But their case, I think U.S. has more opportunity. U.S. Some national labs can do such thing. For example, GFDL. I mean, NOAA put the basic fund to them so that they can maintain the important works. But I'd like to mention one thing. One thing. I mean, what Manabe responded to press conference in Princeton University a couple months ago after receiving a Nobel Prize. One Japanese reporter asked him, "Why you change citizenship from Japan to U.S.?" He said that Japan is a kind of harmonious society. He nicely talked harmonious, meaning that, and he said, people said yes, but it is not necessarily yes. So it is confusing, but science is straightforward. He said he cannot. He doesn't have capability to work in that society, so then he moved, and he really had a good opportunity. His boss supported continuously for free work, so that he can grow. So that's why he changed his citizenship from Japan to U.S. I think, in a sense, Oriental community has something that harmonious, meaning that seeing same thing, parallel, seeing same thing. Some strange is very difficult to survive. So that maybe blocks some creativity.
We need some sort of environment, some sort of enabling environment where you can feel harmonious and where you can have the funding and you don't need to worry. And you can do this basic science, this basic research. Is there any such opportunities here in Korea, would you say? And I'll ask you, Dr. Lisana, later, Professor, if it's we have it in Sweden or in Europe?
Yes, I think in Korea there is some opportunity, such as Center of Excellence program, SRC, Science Research Center, which I also received that center year 2000, and I mean, Science Foundation supported for 9 years for basic research. We supported 15 professors nationwide, but it was very difficult to manage professors, so that I gave up, and I just concentrated on my own research. And I think we have such a program, but still social life is important.
Yeah,
sure. But I don't know how we can combine those things. I think this is not only in Korea, but it's everywhere in the world.
Yeah. What do you say, Professor Lisana?
About if there are good research environments here in Sweden, is that what you asked?
If we have these open, free, basic science opportunities where you don't need to show fast results.
Okay. Yeah, this is very hard. So I think about going 5 years without publishing. But I think that this is a huge survivorship bias that we see. I mean, going 5 years without publishing, it's an honorable thing and a huge investment. And here the upside was actually huge. But I think for most people, going for 5 years without publishing, you cannot survive. So we're seeing now what one person did. And I'm not sure that this is the best way for every individual scientist to actually do. Okay, so I think a much better way is to continuously publishing, benchmark your results against other people. I'd say it's a better way for most people.
Okay. It's probably a struggle. I'm sorry, I think we need to move on. We're actually late on the schedule, but this is what you get when you have interesting people. Give them a stage and a microphone and you cannot get them stop talking. And it's because we have so interesting questions. Please stay. So we're going to take a break now before the next session. 3-minute break, and we're going to show you a video, a promotion video about Sweden. You'll find it interesting. And while you're watching, please stand up, stretch your legs, go and get some coffee, something to drink, take a break, and we'll see you back in 3 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about the stress.
스웨덴 사람들은 스타일리시하면서 동시에 지속 가능한 패션을 추구하는 게 참 근사한 것 같아요.
Many Swedes ride a bike to work every day. I also enjoy biking here in Seoul.
스웨덴은 장애에 대한 편견이 적고 모두 함께하는 사회입니다.
학원도 안 가고 공부 스트레스도 없는 스웨덴 가보고 싶어요.
There are many similarities doing business in Sweden and Korea. We share a big focus on innovation and a strong passion to win.
스웨덴도 한국처럼 e스포츠가 인기가 많아요. 저는 홍대에 있는 VR 게임장 정말 좋아해요. 너무 멋져요.
노벨의 나라 스웨덴과 한국의 공통점은 두 나라 모두 기초과학과 응용과학의 발전을 위해 아낌없이 투자한다는 점입니다.
스웨덴 대학은 교수와 학생 간 서열이 없어요. 마음껏 질문하고 자유롭게 토론할 수 있죠.
스웨덴 적십자 야정병원에서 치료를 받고 저희 생명을 구했습니다. 스웨덴은 은인의 나라입니다.
스웨덴은 한국 전쟁 이후 대한민국의 근대 의료 체계 정비에 크게 기여하였습니다.
89 år som det är mellan 13.
The Swedish delegation to the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission, established by the Armistice Agreement, has been here since 1953.
Contributing to peace and stability on the peninsula.
As you have seen, the relations between our two countries are broad, they are deep, and they are tremendously dynamic. Sweden will continue to partner with the Republic of Korea as it makes its transition towards a green and carbon-neutral society. We will continue to support peace on the Korean peninsula, and we will continue to seek new and innovative partnerships. Come collaborate with Sustainable Sweden.
Welcome back. We have had two amazing sessions this afternoon, Korea time, and morning, Swedish time. And we'll welcome you back after this short break. And we're going to resume, and we're going to focus on chemistry. This is the chemistry session. And the next speaker, Professor Sven Ledin, he always says that chemistry is the most important award every year. And I agree with him, because chemistry is the knowledge bridge between physics and biology. Yeah, let's say that. And what could possibly be more important than that? If you have control of chemistry, you control the world, you rule the world. So let me introduce Professor Sven Ledin. He will talk more about this. Professor at Lund University, Professor Ledin have said, yeah, I already said that. I can see that why he would think chemistry is the most important. First, because he is a chemist, of course, but also because it connects to physics and biology. Professor Ledin is fellow at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences and noted for his work in inorganic chemistry. He served in the Nobel Committee for Chemistry for several years, including as a chair, which gave him, of course, inside knowledge in the selection process of candidates for the Nobel Prize in chemistry. If you have questions about that, you should put them to Professor Ledin, and I think we're going to hear some about this as well. Good morning, Professor Ledin, and very welcome indeed. I hope you can hear us. We can see you. Can you see us or hear us?
Now I can hear you.
All right, Professor, good morning. Welcome, good to see you.
Good morning.
The floor is yours.
Great to be here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be back in South Korea. And as I'm sure you've said, the most important Nobel Prize in this year is the Chemistry Prize. And of course, that's true every year. And I think it's important to state this, that whatever you do, you should do it with conviction. It is important that as a scientist, you are excited and gripped by your subject. And so for me, this is very real. There is also a good reason why. Chemistry is a central science, the central science. And when I look at the prizes in chemistry and compare them to the prizes in medicine and physics, the overlap is always great. And this is quite important for the role of our various disciplines, the fact that they are so intermingled today that the boundaries between chemistry, physiology of medicine, and physics are rather vague. But I will take you on a short journey of the history of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry with respect to subdisciplines before entering into this year. And so during the first years, up to the beginning of the First World War, we can see that the prize was very much dominated by organic and physical chemistry. Biochemistry was a small subject. Inorganic chemistry was quite important. But let's move forward in time. So if we move up till before the Second World War, what we see is that, of course, everything is growing, but it's notable that nuclear chemistry is quite an important subject. So lots of discoveries were made during these days. Biochemistry has increased dramatically up till 1939, but we're still dominated by physical and organic chemistry. As we move forward, up to 1959, and now I will move in, from this I will move in years of 10. You see that biochemistry again has the strongest growth and becomes the dominant area over time, where Nobel Prizes have been awarded in chemistry. And this is quite stable over the next decades, up till 1969, 79, 89, 99, 2009, and of course up until today's prize, this year's prize. You see that the prizes are quite dominated by biochemistry, organic chemistry, and to some extent physical chemistry. What is important to realize is that this year's prize brings together two very important sub-areas, namely biochemistry and organic. And I will get into the details of why in a brief moment. So, of course, we are here to celebrate the contributions of David Macmillan and Benjamin Lewis. And we have to try to understand what they did and why this is so profoundly important. It's catalysis. And of course, catalysis is something that has been celebrated with Nobel Prizes in chemistry many times. First, the description of catalysis itself by Ostwald. Then specific catalysts by Sabatier and Ziegler-Natta. Then comes stereo, which of course is a very important part of this year's prize. And recently, asymmetric catalysis, olefin metathesis, palladium catalyzed cross couplings, and then this year's. So what we see is that this year's prize is the natural continuation of a trend of synthetic organic chemistry, where organic chemists have become increasingly successful in controlling chemical reactions. What is particularly fascinating about this year's prize is that it combines many positive aspects of how we want chemistry to proceed. It is highly efficient. It is environmentally friendly, using small and readily available compounds. It's also quite fast. So catalysis by organocatalysis is fascinating because it allows us to do things faster, cheaper, and more efficient, and in a highly selective fashion. The interesting thing is that this also needs to be thought about in the context of protein, and so in terms of biochemistry. One of the key ideas here is to use proline, a simple amino acid, to take the function of an aldolase, which is a protein consisting of 360 amino acids. So out of the full circle, we take 1 degree of the content and check, does that work? And this was one of the prime discoveries that indeed it does. Now, this places this year's discovery also in the intellectual framework of understanding how protein. And of course, this started before Perut and Kendrew in 1962. But it was first with the structural understanding of proteins that we got an understanding that proteins are such well-defined unities. There was then a lot of work concerning how proteins work and how they become so efficient. And what is very interesting is that it was rather late that we came up with the idea that we can actually improve on the workings of proteins. Because everyone thought that proteins had evolved over billions of years and were optimal in some sense. Of course, they're only optimal for living creatures. They're optimal because they are ubiquitous. They are optimal because they can be changed. We want the catalytic action to be quite specific. And therefore, we can see the development of Shimomura, Chalfen, and Sien, where they not only discovered the GFP, but also developed it further. The prize to Francis Arnold in 2018 for directed evolutions of enzymes, where we again improve on the actions of enzymes. And I think with the work of the 2 laureates this year, to show that they can also be simplified and yet remain efficient. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Ledin. That was very interesting. And please hang around for the discussion in a while. But first, I would like to introduce our next speaker, which is Professor Hye-Young Yang. Please, welcome up to the stage. Professor Yang received her doctorate from University of Texas at Austin and was a research scholar at Caltech Macmillan Lab. She's now professor at the School of Chemistry at Purdue University. And among many other things, Professor Kang has worked as a leader for the Brain Korea 21 program. This seeks to make Korean research universities globally competitive and produce more high-quality researchers. This is a topic that's very much interesting, and maybe we'll have time to speak a little bit about that too. Very warmly welcome, Professor Yang.
안녕하세요. 아주대학교 장혜영입니다. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Hye-Young Jang, a professor at Purdue University. Professor Ledin just explained the meaning and history of the chemistry award of the Nobel Prize. So I would like to talk a little bit about the achievements of Professor List and Professor Macmillan from a different point of view. In 2005, when Professor Macmillan was at Caltech, I jointly conducted research together with him, and I have been conducting research and catalyst at Purdue University after I came back to Korea. Before moving on to the main topic of my presentation, I would like to introduce the relation of these 2 professors with Korea. On the left-hand side, you can see a picture. 2 professors both visit Korea frequently, and in 2017, Professor Macmillan came to Korea to participate in UMCO's conference, and the picture is a group photo taken back then. And we also have some descendants or students of Professor Macmillan. And We have Professor Chung Won-yang and Professor Han Young-bae at Cheonggyungan University, who are students of Professor List, and also Professor Lee Sung-gi is a student of Professor List. So we have many students in Korea who learned from these two professors. This year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to asymmetric organocatalysis, and according to the Nobel Committee, it is described as a new and ingenious tool for molecule building. However, it is not that asymmetric organocatalyst did not exist before, but it would be more accurate to describe it as a substance that was already in nature but was shown light to the world through the two researchers. I think the Nobel Prize was awarded for not only the pioneering research, but also their application in other fields. So it's a little bit complicated, but I would like to explain what asymmetric organocatalysis is. Asymmetric organocatalysis is a catalyst that doesn't contain metal, which helps to synthesize asymmetric organic compounds. A catalyst is a material that lowers the activation energy of a chemical reaction, making it easier to perform a reaction that is impossible or requires high energy without a catalyst. So, I think you might be curious what asymmetric organic compound is. So I think you can think of the relation between the left hand and the right hand. It seems identical, but if there is a mirror in between, then the left hand and the right hand are like non-identical mirror images of each other. They look the same but cannot be overlapped if you try to overlap your two hands, even though they look identical. So the relationship between these two organic compounds is called enantiomer. And if the number and type of constituent elements are the same and the structure is the same, but if it has a three-dimensional structure reflected on a mirror, like the relationship between the left hand and the right hand, it is said to be in an enantiomer relationship. The importance of asymmetric organic materials was highlighted because of the tragedy of thalidomide sold in the late 1950s. So these two look the same, but you can see the balls marked in red and marked in blue. On the slide, you can see the structure of the two enantiomers of thalidomide, and as you can see, the structure is almost identical, with the only difference being the red and blue balls. But thalidomide on the left helps relieve morning sickness in pregnant women, but the substance on the right causes birth defects. So back then, there was a tragedy that these two substances were sold without being separated, and many children were born without limbs. So since then, the synthesis of asymmetric organic compounds has become a very important research field in the pharmaceutical industry. And Professor Lidin also explained about enzyme as catalyst and also metal catalyst. So catalysts for synthesizing asymmetric organic compounds were actively studied before 2000, focused on enzymes and metal catalysts. In 2001, Knowles, Noyori, and Sharpless were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their work on these catalysts. 2 decades later, finally, this year, the third type of catalyst, organic catalyst, was awarded the Nobel Prize in the field of asymmetric organocatalysis. In 2000, Professor Macmillan and Professor List published an article almost at the same time. So, Professor Macmillan was able to perform the chiral Diels-Alder reaction with a high stereoselectivity of 93% using the asymmetric amine shown in the figure as a catalyst. And as you can see from the orange box on the bottom, if a chiral catalyst reacts with non-chiral material, it will generate an intermediate called idiomen. And I quote Macmillan's word. He said, "Surprisingly, however, relatively few asymmetric transformations have been reported which employ organic molecules as reaction catalysts, despite the widespread availability of organic chemicals in enantiopure form." We can see that Professor Macmillan was surprised that despite the existence of a group of candidates for asymmetric organocatalysis, such as amino acid and carbohydrate, they were not applied to asymmetric reactions so far, and Professor Macmillan was also surprised by that fact. And actually, Professor Macmillan created this name, organocatalysis, and in his paper, and this paper marks a full-fledged start to this field of organocatalysis. Now let me introduce Professor List's paper published in 2000. This paper also reports on asymmetric reaction using proline, a type of amino acid that is also a chiral amine compound. In the course of aldolase antibody research, Professor List saw the mechanism of the reaction of the class 1 aldolase enzyme and recognized that enamine intermediates can be used for chemical reactions generically. So this was the idea that he had, and he initiated this research thinking that the chemical reaction that occur within the enzyme can be taken out of the enzyme and a new organic catalyst research can be started. As you can see from this graph, since their studies were published, research on organocatalysis and organocatalyst is exploding with the number of papers increasing. And more than 1,000 papers are published each year. Here you can see the steps of organocatalysis, and by applying asymmetric organocatalyst, you can shorten the steps of synthesis from 25 to 12. And on the right, you can see that paroxetine used as an antidepressant and oseltamivir used for treating viral flu was synthesized using asymmetric organocatalysis also. Along with the application of organocatalysis in the synthesis of natural products and medicine, the scope of organocatalytic reaction itself is expanding. For example, previously, the domain of organocatalysis was limited to nucleophilic electrophilic reactions in which two electrons move organochemically, but this SOMO catalysis expands the scope of reaction to radicals. So I want to finish my presentation with a quote from the two professors. Professor Macmillan once said something like this: "The stuff that should never work is where all the good stuff is." As a person in the research profession, I think the remark seems to give a glimpse of hope, as it implies that even though I may struggle every day with my research topic, someday it will prove itself as a good stuff, waiting for discovery. And Professor List said, making molecules is like creating something beautiful. And I think he gave the message that if you study hard, you'll be able to reach a point where even hard and bleak chemicals can someday look beautiful. Thank you very much for your attention.
interesting. What a fascinating topic and what a fascinating result they have achieved between them. And it's interesting to hear that you're saying that maybe they were rewarded or awarded for doing several things and not only this. But let me ask you first to connect to the images that Professor Ledin showed of organic and biochemistry and what the focus of chemistry in Korea is. Are you active in all those pillars, on all those different directions of chemistry, or is chemistry in Korea focusing on any particular of those areas?
In the area of catalysts, in the field of catalysts, I don't think we can really clearly distinguish different sectors. For example, I am specializing in organocatalysis and also transient metal catalysis. And sometimes I combine the two, and sometimes I only conduct a research focusing on organocatalysis. So I don't think we can know the clear separation or the clear boundary between different areas. In the past, we were able to distinguish different areas, but now we are seeing more and more convergence between research areas. So I don't think there is a clear-cut boundary between these research areas. And I think the trend in the scientific field is convergence. So convergence between biochemistry, organic chemistry, and inorganic chemistry. I think even synergetic catalysis is a result of converging organic catalysis with inorganic catalysis and photocatalysis. And I think the future direction is convergence. I'm not sure I'm answering your question correctly, but that is my answer.
You did definitely answer it. And I'm going to give you a follow-up question, which is really a question from one of the viewers. So please continue sending your questions online, and we'll pick them up as much as we can. And the question was, are researchers getting inspired by previous Nobel Awards? And that's relating to what we spoke about just now. Can you see that among researchers in Korea, researchers in Korea, that that is a fact, that you get inspired by Nobel Awards?
Yes, of course. Every year after the Nobel Award is announced, I also personally have a lot of interest in the Nobel Prize, and with the announcement of the Nobel Prize award, I think more interest is given to that area of research. And I think, of course, scientists in the same field will take interest in the Nobel Award, but I think potential students or potential chemists would be able to take interest in this field of, for example, organocatalysis, because it was awarded with the Nobel Prize, and it can be a great source of inspiration.
Do you think the pillars that you showed us are actually a self-reinforcing process going on? Because a lot of you get awards in one area, then the next year there will be more people focusing on that area because it's giving reward, and then it's increasing. I'm guessing here.
I think probably not, for the very simple reason that we are so slow in awarding the Nobel Prize winning research. Typical lead times are 25 years because it takes a long time for a radically new idea to take root. And once we come to realize that this is a truly important breakthrough, we need to work our way back to find who did what and what impact it had. And so the pioneering work of Macmillan and List, for which they are now awarded, is 20 years old by now. So the fact that it has become important is mirrored in the many people who are using these methods today, rather than everyone using them because it has been awarded with the Nobel Prize. So I think we are more a reflection of research society than the pathfinders. I do hope that the Nobel Prize has the capacity of putting the searchlight on an area and to show how science. But I don't think that the areas that are awarded this year are going to receive all that much more attention in the coming years, because it has already received that, and that is partially why they are awarding the Nobel Prize.
Okay, thank you. This is such a fascinating topic with how we get high quality researchers, and I really would like an opportunity to talk more about that. But I have another pressing question. There are more than 3,000 patents on asymmetric organocatalysis alone. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. As I understand it, it's not the methods as such that are patented. So the findings that the professors did, that they are being awarded for, are not patented, but the patents are coming as a result of that. Can you please talk a little bit about the view on patents here in Korea?
Yeah, chemical process.
Yes, I think patenting a chemical process is not impossible or not that difficult, but issuing a patent itself is not difficult. However, if we are commercializing this technology, the patent is there to protect my intellectual property right, but sometimes it is not that easy to get my intellectual property right protected if the patent is on a method. Because if a patent is on the source material, then we can get proper protection. But for method, it is very hard to confirm whether the method was infringed. So I think the problem is at the commercialization stage. After commercialization, getting proper protection is what is a challenge. However, still, patenting a chemical process is not impossible, and I also apply patents on chemical processes, and many scientists are making efforts to get their IPR protected by preparing the claims well. So I think it's better to get patents on a new chiral material rather than the method.
The process, we can expect this. Professor Ledin.
Yes, and if we look at the fundamental design, these would be very difficult to patent because it is such a general result that it's possible to catalyze an organic reaction using a chiral small molecule. If that was patented, it would mean that it would not be possible to use a small molecule if it's chiral in an organic reaction without proving that it's actually catalytic. Such extremely wide-ranging patents cannot be awarded, and we should be very grateful for that, because that would be a straitjacket for science. But the large number of patents for specific reactions is, of course, a measure of how industrially important these findings have become over time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your very interesting presentations and your conversation. And my apologies to the audience for having run a little bit over. But before we leave this sciences session, I want to invite the ambassador to give a few closing words. Thank you, Professor Ledin. Thank you, Professor Young. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anders, and many thanks to all the speakers for your kind and brilliant participation. And thanks again to our partners and to Eva Women's University for the support. Many thanks, of course, to the audience for your very insightful questions. And I'd also like to thank our excellent interpreter who has made it possible to have this session concomitantly in English and in Korean. I scribbled some notes during this session. I have to say it's quite a humbling experience as a diplomat to be in this incredibly intellectually stimulating crowd. It's not every day that we hear about spin glass systems, stochastic resonance, and organocatalysis in my line of work. But I really want to underline a few things that I think many of you put emphasis on in your presentation. And that is really the fun and the love of learning. Someone put the love of launching and landing new ideas, which I think is really the basis of scientific discovery and scientific progress. And I think in this regard, Sweden has a lot to learn from Korea, and I hope that Korea certainly also has a lot to learn from Sweden. And this is a great basis for collaboration, I think, between our two countries. But now our Nobel Memorial Program will continue with a session on the economic sciences, and after that on literature. So I invite all of you to come back in half an hour and join us then. Thank you very much.